Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Crane Kick Commentaries podcast.
Spooky.
Yes, it's a spooky movie today. Today we are talking about the classic John Carpenter movie, The Fog. Today I am joined, as always, by my friend Keaton.
Hello.
And today we are joined by our special guest, horror enthusiast, Mimi Beyer.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome, Mimi. So, Mimi, how would you summarize this movie?
I would say it's very much a classic ghost story. It opens with some grizzled sea captain giving a group of kids like a scary campfire story, like at midnight. And the whole premise is that it's the 100th year anniversary of this town being founded. And there's a story that 100 years ago, like a ship crashed into the rocks after being lured in by a campfire, and now the sailors are coming back to seek their vengeance, and the movie just kind of follows how that plays out.
What do you think?
Okay.
What do you think of that narrative? Do you think that's a good narrative just off the bat?
Just on paper, absolutely. It's really, really classic. It's very much like the hook-handed man kind of like classic ghost story.
Yeah, no, totally, it is. And I've actually, that's funny that you should mention the hook-handed man. I was watching an interview with John Carpenter, where he was saying that early on he did want to kind of recreate that quality.
Oh,
that's what he was drawing from, and he did mention the hook-handed murderer. So,
I think that was very successful,
Yeah.
and at least in just the ambiance of it.
I think they definitely captured that properly.
That was immediately where my mind went with the first opening scene. Was this sounds like he's about to tell that story?
Well, because he opens, yeah, exactly. Campfire story. They set the stage pretty on the nose with that, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, I was very envious of those kids.
Yeah, and I mean,
It seems like a pretty great camp out.
Yeah, very, very creepy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty good premise. It's a very, very tried and true kind of idea to make a horror movie.
Especially for that era.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
how do you figure?
Just because, I feel like there was a lot of kind of, I don't know, classic resurgence at that point. A lot of the Stephen King stuff, too.
what, right around early 80s?
There's kind of, well, it was like when all the kids who had been watching like the original The Thing, and all those 50s horror films, like B flicks that made it onto TV.
Yeah,
very much so. They grew up and had a nostalgia for that feel, and I feel like John Carpenter's kind of the purest form of that.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Would you like to talk about what we're getting into next year?
Yeah, well, I thought today, instead of focusing too much on John Carpenter, we'll still talk about him for sure.
Yeah.
But I figured we might talk a bit about Debra Hill.
Okay.
In a little bit more depth than we talk about John Carpenter. Are either of you guys familiar with Debra Hill?
Yeah.
At all?
So she was definitely part of the whole I guess I would call it a horror clique kind of thing that she worked on a whole bunch of movies with John Carpenter and with a bunch of other people who were in this movie, including Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween's kind of like the apex of that, I think.
Yeah, well, it's how this whole kind of thing starts, and you get a lot of the same people crossing over into this movie as well.
Yeah, and we will talk about some of those people.
Yes.
Mimi, do you know anything about Debra Hill?
Not very much, just that they were dating at the time that they kind of started coming up with the concept for this movie.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and again that she's really involved in a lot of other stuff.
I'll get to her in more detail in a moment. First, I'm going to talk about John Carpenter and his career a bit leading up to Debra Hill, and then I'll kind of talk about her a bit, and then we'll talk about how them together, the whole era of when The Fog, when they wrote it and when they started making it. And then after that, I believe Jake will take us on another journey. We'll start talking about the cinematographer, Dean Cundy, who's a very fascinating figure.
Yeah, definitely.
Am I pronouncing his last name correctly? Do you know? Is it Cundy?
I think it's Cundy. I mean, maybe it's Cundy. I don't know, but as far as I know, it's Dean Cundy.
Dean Cundy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with talking about him, will kind of lead us naturally to talking about some of the Carpenter filming techniques.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
Are like kind of commonplace. And we'll talk about why the fact that Dean Cundy is around a lot has a lot to do with that, I imagine. But
yeah.
And then Jake's going to talk a
yes.
bit about
Yes.
the music, as I understand it. So that'll be fun because the music, if you've seen the film, you know is a major part of this film. A thing we should maybe mention is that there's going to be some major spoilers.
Oh, yeah. So if you haven't seen The Fog, I don't know, we're going to ruin it for you. So
Yeah.
you don't have to
The Fog
watch it if
ruined.
you don't want to, but if you don't want it spoiled, watch it first. All right, so with that, shall we get right into it then?
Yeah, we shall. So John Carpenter is a very interesting director. He's made many films across various genres, and although he focuses on a wide range of subject matter, he most notably horror is probably what he's known for, I think.
Well, I would say horror and science fiction, but definitely towards the more horror end of the science fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Like horror, science fiction, action, thriller, adventure, comedy. He's done a lot. He's done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, throughout them all, he's kind of a master of one particular element of filmmaking, and that element is atmosphere.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, I mean, he's the horror master, self-described.
Yeah, exactly. Self-described.
That's his Twitter handle, actually. I think is John Carpenter at Horror Master.
That's great.
Yeah, his ability to create a unique atmosphere is pretty much like, as you were saying, it's what leads films like Halloween and The Fog to become the cult classics that they have. Yeah, in order to do this, he uses a lot of different facets of filmmaking. The way the camera's directed, the practical effects, and the scores, which, as you know, he often composes himself.
Yeah.
He's not solely responsible for these details, but we're going to talk about all that. First, we'll talk about a little bit of his career.
Right.
He began his career at the University of Southern California. He majored in English at first, I believe, and then he started studying film.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really interesting about his university career is that in 1970 he co-wrote, edited, and scored a short film called The Resurrection of Bronco Billy.
Okay.
Have you ever heard
no,
of that
I've not
film?
heard of that. No.
No.
Maybe you never heard it. I assume you never heard
No,
of it. I don't know
no,
why you
I've
would
never
have.
I like the sound of it, though.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. I watched it. It's not very long. It's a good little short film. But it won the Oscar in 1970.
Oh, really?
For best short film.
Right. But he didn't. I assume Carpenter didn't get that.
Well, I don't know. He might have. I'm sure he got credit. He worked on it. I don't know who gets the Oscar
For that
when,
particular. Probably the director, though, right?
It was probably the production.
Right. Yeah.
I really don't know. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting. The score is a lot more kind of cowboyish music. There's whistling and a jaunty cowboy tune.
Right. He hadn't discovered synthesizers yet.
Yeah, it wasn't quite a synthy vibe quite yet.
Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting about that film is that one of the other co-writers was a guy named Nick Castle.
That name rings a bell.
There he is.
Yeah.
Maybe do you know who Nick Castle is?
Yes.
Enlighten us.
Oh, I only know about him in the context of The Fog, really.
Right.
Enlighten me.
The character is named after him.
Yeah, the main character, Nick, is named after this Nick Castle. It's true.
Yeah, and he worked on a few things with him, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he co-wrote this short film, The Resurrection of Bronco Billy. He played Michael Myers in Halloween.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
He was
that's
one of
what
the
it is,
people
yeah.
who played Michael Myers.
Yeah,
Because I
there were
believe there
several.
were, yeah.
There were several people, but he was the main guy, and he got paid $25 a day.
Yeah, he's named a few other characters or elements of his other films after him, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think he's kind of a recurring thing. He seems to used to like using people's names, kind of.
I
his
mean,
stuff.
yeah, like, he uses the name Loomis a lot.
Yeah, he even kind of has it as like a screen name for one of the actresses.
Yeah.
Even though that's not really like her actual name, but throughout all of the work she's done for him, she's referred to as Loomis.
Right, yeah. Well, I believe Loomis was actually the name of a character in the movie Psycho?
Oh, that's probably what it's a reference to.
Yeah, and I believe we have some crossover with that film in this film.
Yeah.
There is a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Carpenter really liked his little references like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when he made Assault on Precinct 13, he also edited that film. I forget exactly. It was like John T. Chance, I believe was the name he edited.
Right.
Edited. Oh my god, I'm stumbling around that word. And that's a John Wayne reference.
Oh, okay. I know he really liked Westerns.
Yeah, that story is loosely based on like a John Wayne story, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, back to Nick Castle. Just a few more interesting little tidbits about him. Is he also co-wrote Escape from New York?
Oh.
With Carpenter and Debra Hill.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And
I believe the
that's
same
Carpenter.
actor who played Nick in The Fog as well, I believe, was also in that movie.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's like multiple layers of crossover.
So, but just to be clear, Nick Castle's not in this movie, right?
no,
No, he's just
No,
okay. He's just referred to by name because a character has his name.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And not related to John Carpenter, but just fun little fact about Nick Castles. He also wrote a screenplay for Hook.
Oh,
Point.
Oh,
there's some more crossover with this movie and that movie as well.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's
I mean,
all
we'll
thought,
get
but
to that later when I do my section.
Fun.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So he made this Oscar-winning short film while he was still in university.
Cool.
So that's pretty nice notch on your belt.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
it's a very auspicious start for a career.
Yeah.
So then he worked on his first feature film. I use that kind of term
What feature?
sparingly.
Are we talking about Dark Star?
Yeah, to
Okay.
describe Dark Star.
Right. It is technically a feature film.
Yeah, it's a feature-length film.
Yeah.
Yeah, he worked on that film for like 4 years, from like 1970 to 1974, and it was kind of an on-again, off-again project that was
Right.
like, I think towards the end of it, he said he kind of viewed it almost as like a resume. Like he'd put that out there and he'd have this feature-length film, and
Yeah.
maybe he could start making other films.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like a lot of the people he like went to school with wouldn't have had like a full-on feature-length film like that they
Yeah,
could just show,
yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the guys he co-wrote the film Dark Star with
Dan
was a
O'Bannon?
guy named Dan O'Bannon.
Danny boy, here we go. Yeah.
Well, what do you know about Dan O'Bannon?
I know that he wrote the movie Alien, I believe.
He did write the movie Alien.
Yes.
And he's another character in The Fog.
Yeah. I believe that John Carpenter does that in a couple of different films. He uses the name Dan
Yeah.
O'Bannon. But yeah, so I believe that there's a section. Well, I mean, there's sort of a story that Alien is based on. Like, I mean, it's not really a story. I mean, I think Dan O'Bannon actually said this. Alien is basically based on this one segment in Dark Star.
Yeah, I remember reading him saying that.
Yeah, so like there's this section where there's this sort of like alien, which the prop is like really stupid looking. It's made out of a beach ball, and he's just chasing this alien all around the ship, and it's actually kind of played for comedy in Dark Star. But Dan O'Bannon got the idea from doing this that he'd write an entire movie sort of about like chasing an alien through a ship.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, and so Dan O'Bannon, I believe he's actually in Dark Star.
Yeah,
He's one of the actors. Yeah.
He's one of the actors. He also was like had a small special effects role on Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
didn't know
so after Dark Star, he met Debra Hill on the set of Assault on Precinct 13. She was a script supervisor and ended up like assistant editing a little bit on the film. But she was like a script supervisor at first, and like as they talked and whatnot, she got adopted more roles and kind of adopted the role of a producer a little bit more towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that John Carpenter would need some help with that.
Go on.
No, just because, like, I don't know, he seems like he, the idea of being on a movie set always stressed him out, it seems like.
He definitely is, like, more of a creative type, I think.
Yeah.
Than,
yeah, that's for sure. Managerial kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so now that brings us to Debra Hill. So just before we continue, we'll talk about Debra Hill a little bit.
Okay.
She was a producer and a writer by title, but she mostly would have considered herself, based on everything I've looked at, she would have just considered herself just a filmmaker in general. And
she wore a lot of hats when it comes to
she did.
Movie, yeah.
She wore a lot of hats. In every movie she seems to have worked on.
Yeah.
She sadly passed away in 2005 of cancer before she was able to make her directorial debut. But I think she always kind of considered herself a director, and she was slotted to even direct a film the year before she passed on, unfortunately.
Was she involved in the remake in any way, or did she pass away before that?
Yes,
the remake of this. I didn't actually watch the remake. I don't know about you.
I've never seen the remake, no.
I watched the remake when it first came out.
Oh, so what did you think, Mimi?
Oh, it was a very, very long time ago. I remember being petrified of it.
Right.
When it first came out, like, I was legitimately terrified of it.
It came out in 2005, so you saw it when in theaters.
Yeah, I was 11, so I was pretty easily scared. I was scared of the Amityville Horror remake too, so
right.
I don't know what that says. That's not a ringing endorsement for me being afraid of the fog.
I steered clear of all those films in that time. I don't like horror films that much growing up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say it's definitely something that grew on me as well.
I spent a lot of time watching that at, like, my friend's house. We'd watch all the horror movies on pay-per-view, like, as they came out.
Oh, yeah?
Like, all those terrible mid-2000s
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, that was a dark time for horror, definitely. And that's kind of when I got into it.
Yeah, you have, like, the Ring and, what are those other ones? The Grudge.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like all the American versions of, like, the Japanese classics were kind of coming out in that period.
There were a lot of remakes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, is there anything from that time that I actually, like, a horror movie that I actually thought was, like, pretty good? I'm trying to think. I can't come up with one right now, but you know.
I remember actually I enjoyed a movie called The Host. I think it was called.
Oh,
it was like a South Korean horror film.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a good movie from, I think, that general period.
So Debra Hill never actually got to participate in that remake, is what you were saying.
No, she did. She did.
That was her last things, because they worked on that together, I believe.
Yeah, her and Carpenter. That was their last project togetger.
Well, what did Carpenter actually do on the remake?
I think he was mostly just a consultant. I think
because I seem to remember I was watching an interview with Carpenter where he was talking about, like, doing remakes, and he was saying his favorite kind of remake is where they just hand him money and then he doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like that. Because I think it was The Fog he was talking about, but yeah, I was watching an interview where he was like, yeah, basically I just put my name on it and like went into the set once and said, hey, how's it going? And then left. Yeah,
because he was saying, like, when they remade The Thing, he didn't get any money from that because he didn't work on the script.
Right.
So, yeah. So if you're a director and you want more money, work on the script a little bit.
Always work on the script. Get that writing credit.
Exactly, get that writing credit.
Um,
Then they'll have to pay you if they use it again.
yeah. Speaking of which, writing credits, Debra Hill. Given at how like influential and prolific her career was, I was pretty disappointed with how little information I was able to find about her. She gave interviews, but like mostly there's kind of retrospective interviews about Halloween and other
Right, so there
Carpenter.
weren't a lot like at the time, or she wasn't like consulted
No.
at least on that.
Pardon?
Or at least people weren't like asking her to do interviews and stuff like that.
Well, I watched. There was like one interview after The Fog was made that interviewed like Janet Leigh and Jamie Lee Curtis and Carpenter and Debra Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the only interview I found with her from that time period.
Right.
And everything else, yeah, is kind of like retrospective stuff, just like stuff like about Halloween and about other Carpenter projects.
Yeah, I mean that is one thing that I found researching this whole thing is that like there's so much information about Halloween, but like all the other movies that all these people worked on, like there's really not as much or anywhere close to that.
None of them quite reach the same level as Halloween, I think.
Yeah, although yeah, definitely. I mean, Halloween is kind of amazing, like how they managed to get that whole thing made, and then that it was so successful on such a tiny budget.
Yeah, well, a lot of that is apparently because of Debra Hill.
Right. Okay.
Like she ran like a really tight ship budget wise.
Right.
She like counting rolls of duct tape and all that sort of thing. But apparently everyone still loved her on the set.
Right. Okay.
Which is a weird kind of two traits to have.
Yeah. That's,
you don't often hear those things mentioned in the same
running a
breath.
tight ship and also people not hating you. Yeah. That's,
It's only that movie had a little bit less to do special effects wise than some of his other movies, though.
Yeah, and actually, in the beginning of Halloween, when you've got Michael Myers' perspective, and he like picks up that toy and then stabs his sister or whatever, or babysitter. Those are Debra Hill's hands.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah.
That's great.
Because they didn't have the child actor for very long, and so,
yeah, I imagine working with child actors
hands?
is actually like not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as we're talking about, she's definitely most famous for her work on the Halloween franchise.
Yeah. So did she work on the later movies with Halloween?
Well,
she was involved in a couple of them, I think, wasn't she?
Yes, she and Carpenter produced and wrote the second one, I believe.
Right.
And then they just produced the third one.
Mm-hmm.
And then they both came back for that early 2000s revamp, I think.
Right.
I think. She co-wrote, as I said earlier, she co-wrote Escape from New York and Escape from LA later on.
Right, yeah. She did a lot of the this whole all the Carpenter movies, really, right?
Well, that early period, like the last one, they kind of went their separate ways after Escape from New York a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Like
she wasn't involved
with...
on They Live or anything, was she?
No, okay. She wasn't really involved after Escape from New York.
Right.
After Escape from New York, she kind of went on to start her own kind of production company, essentially, and she worked on a bunch of films over her career. She worked on early on after Escape from New York. She worked on, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Dead Zone.
No, I haven't.
It's a Stephen King adaptation. It's directed by David Cronenberg.
A contemporary of Carpenter.
No, not Carpenter.
Sorry, no. I'm saying Cronenberg is a contemporary of Carpenter.
Oh, right.
They worked. Sorry. Yeah, they worked on like similar kinds of movies. Although Cronenbergs were obviously like both more successful and more disgusting.
Yeah, horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then after that, she started making like she made like a few kind of comedy films, like the Clue movie.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I've
I
not actually
remember
seen
that,
it, but
yeah.
I'm very aware of its existence.
She started a production company with a woman named Linda Obst, and they produced this production company produced the Clue movie. They did Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, they did a few others in the '90s. They did I don't know if you've heard of the movie The Fisher King.
I
It's
can't
Jeff,
recall it.
Jeff Bridges and Robin Williams film.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds interesting, but
It is interesting. I started watching it the other day because it sounded interesting,
yeah.
and I got about 2/3 of the way through before it lost me.
So you thought it was interesting, but you were wrong.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Growing up, Debra Hill moved around a lot.
Yeah.
One of the towns she lived in was a town called Haddonfield, New Jersey. Now, Haddonfield, it's just fun little trivia. It's the town in Halloween.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I should know that.
Except it's not in New Jersey in the movie. I believe it's in Illinois.
Right. Interesting thing about the setting of that movie, didn't they have to, because they actually filmed it in California. I don't believe they filmed it in Illinois.
Yeah, they did in California.
So
you can see palm trees in a couple shots.
yeah, and actually they had to like bring in a bunch of dead leaves to make it look like it was like fall.
Yeah.
That must have been a very interesting call to make.
We have to be careful that we don't just start talking about Halloween because
Yeah, it's
honestly,
true. Yes, definitely.
looking up this film, trying to like learn about the fog, I just by accident
Kept
of having to
finding
like
out
look
Halloween
through
facts.
shit,
Yeah.
I learned more about Halloween.
Yeah, I know
fog.
a lot about Halloween after having done this.
Whose idea was it to cover the fog specifically?
I think it was
it's
me.
it's kind of a niche thing to cover. It's not one of his most famous things.
Well, yes, and I think that's why I wanted to do it, because it's I mean, on this podcast we generally haven't done like movies that often get a lot of spotlight on them.
Yeah.
Or at least spotlight in the way that we give it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
it's an interesting way to look at all the people involved in their careers. It's just like right after Halloween, what are you going to do next? It's just interesting.
Yeah.
I remember
interesting.
one of the tidbits of trivia I remember reading was that they spent about 3 times the budget of the movie on advertising for it.
Yeah.
It was like $3 million.
Yeah. I mean, actually, it seems like it worked out well, because I mean, on a $1 million budget, or if you include the advertising, $3 million, I guess they made like a $20 million profit. So that's,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a very profitable movie considering what they put into it.
Exactly.
And it filmed in a pretty short amount of time too, didn't it?
Sorry?
It filmed in a very short amount of time.
Well, they
like,
filmed
it
it in a short amount of time, but as we'll get into, there was
yeah.
there was some stuff after the filming completed that we'll talk about.
Yeah. When Debra Hill was growing up, she encountered like a couple other people who would go on to be in film, like in Haddonfield. Like Steven Spielberg lived briefly in Haddon County.
Oh, interesting.
Near Haddonfield. And then this guy, like a producer who went on to make some big budget films, also lived in Haddonfield. And when she was growing up, she used to hang out with a guy named Tom Sims. And this is just a really like kind of out of nowhere fact, really pointless fact that I'm about to give you guys here.
Tom Sims.
Tom Sims is credited as the inventor of snowboarding.
Wait, what?
What?
Yeah,
What?
he's credited as he invented like snowboarding. Apparently, yeah, he used to
If
talk
I
to
was
her.
a snowboarding enthusiast, would I know who Tom Sims is?
I don't know, maybe, probably. Well, because he apparently would always talk about the idea of like surfing, but on skis.
Okay. Surfing.
And after he invented the surfboard, Tom Sims he went on to be a stunt double for James Bond, or
For which one?
what's his name? Yeah, in A View to a Kill.
Yes.
What's his name?
I knew
I'm blanking. Why am I blanking on his name? Roger Moore.
Yeah.
Okay,
oh,
yeah.
that's amazing.
That's
this guy.
Very out there fact, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently that fact is apparently what went on to popularize snowboarding was this in this film. This guy
because
because
did he snowboard in the movie?
yeah, there's like a
Yeah,
there's a
that's
chase
the whole
scene.
opening. That's the whole opening is this really, really long, like, skiing, snowboarding, helicopter chase scene.
Right, I'm just trying to
And
remember
all the
if he
credits
really
are in
killed
reference of
because
it.
Of all of the all of the James Bond movies like blend into my head.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, Roger Moore made so many fucking movies. Like they all.
And they were not the best era of them either.
No, they're not. They were entertaining though, so
Yeah.
it's fine.
That one was
Nice
also
snowboard
great.
sequence.
That one was
Yeah.
great because it had like Christopher Walken and Grace Jones in
Oh.
it too. That was such a
What?
good one.
I gotta rewatch this movie because I've definitely seen it, but yeah, I just went ahead and googled Tom Sims, and yeah, he seems to be legit.
He's the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also a world snowboarding champion,
Yeah.
which is odd because you would think, I mean, seems to have an advantage, doesn't he?
Of course, yeah, he invented the sport.
All right.
I'm surprised he's not still the champion.
Yeah, he's also world champion skateboarder.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How old is he? Does it say?
He was born in the year 1950s, so
Wow.
he's dead though.
Wow.
Yeah, rest
Rest
in
in
peace,
peace.
Tom Sims.
Did he die in a snowboarding accident?
No, he was complications due to cardiac arrest.
Oh, that's very
bummer.
sad.
Okay, I think we should probably move on from the snowboarding detour we just took.
I suppose if you want, if you're gonna
yeah.
twist
We
my
should
arm.
we should give Debra Hill some more of the time she deserves here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She studied initially. She went to Temple's University. She studied sociology,
Okay.
and apparently she was so proficient that they offered her a fellowship.
Jeez.
But she was not into that, and
She
she
wanted to
decided
go
instead.
make movies.
Well, initially she didn't know what she wanted to do, so she took a job as a flight attendant
Okay.
in order to see the world, as it were.
I see.
While she was working as a flight attendant, she started dating a musician named Monty Alexander.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a Jamaican jazz musician, and he's quite a significant deal. He's got records.
Okay. I've never heard of him,
Records
but I'm sure. Not
So,
too into
yeah.
the jazz, but could.
She moved to Jamaica for a brief period,
Right.
and while she was dating Monty Alexander, and she actually started writing liner notes for records
Oh. Okay, that's interesting.
while she was there. But then she eventually returned to the States, and this area of her life is very kind of hazy in terms of it's very difficult to kind of find out what she was doing.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, she was offered a job by Playboy.
Oh, okay. That's an odd segue, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, so but she, instead of taking this job at Playboy, she turns it down. Yeah, so she went to LA. Before, her father growing up had been a salesman. That's why they moved around so much.
Right.
But before he had been a salesman, he had worked in Hollywood as like an art director.
Yeah.
I couldn't really find too much information about him, so I don't know that he worked on anything particularly high profile. But he was able to help her get into a union or whatever, and she just got simple Hollywood jobs working as like a PA.
Right. Okay.
And she like worked her way up the ladder.
So, Keaton, do you just want to say quickly, for anybody who doesn't know, what does a PA do?
They take everybody's shit all the time and live life within a hellscape.
Yeah, so they're basically like an assistant kind of thing. They
Yeah.
they like a gopher kind of.
PA stands for production assistant.
Yeah.
I believe. And from everything I've heard about it, it's just basically you just do what you're told by
Exactly.
whoever tells you
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah. It doesn't sound fun.
No, it sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
But she stuck it out and, got other jobs, eventually kind of worked her way up to script supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how she, as I mentioned earlier, that's how she met John Carpenter, working on Assault on Precinct 13. And Mimi, as you mentioned, they began a romantic relationship after Assault on Precinct 13. This period is kind of foggy. It's kind of hard to get total details, but
Boom!
Oh my god. Good job.
This guy named Irwin Yablanis,
Mm-hmm.
he was distributor for Assault on Precinct 13. He distributed it in the UK, where it kind of got a little bit of attention.
Mm-hmm.
He had the basic idea for Halloween. He was like, okay, I want to make a film about babysitters being tormented. I've got
That's
this
a
budget.
rather vague requirement.
Yeah. So he hires Hill and Carpenter to make the movie with like a small budget. I think it was like $300,000, something like that.
Yeah.
So they wrote that for not exactly it's not a production company. It's like a distribution company called Avco Embassy.
Yeah. That comes up in a couple of these movies, including The Fog, I believe, doesn't it?
Yeah. They distributed Halloween. They distributed The Fog. So when writing Halloween, Debra Hill apparently wrote like all the women's dialogue.
Right.
Like all the chatter between the high school girls, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine John Carpenter writing that.
No. Which kind of makes up the bulk of the movie. Really,
it is a lot of the movie,
dialogue.
actually. Yeah.
Believable.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, if the whole
That's
if
what
the
like
whole
all the
thing was-
humanizing elements of that movie are.
it would be a bit more out there because like Dr. Loomis is a crazy fuck.
Yeah. But yeah, she took on a huge role in that film. As I said, she was like, penny pincher, making sure everything was on budget.
That's a theme that's going to come up in this movie, I'm sure.
Yeah. She was the one who cast Jamie Lee Curtis. It was her idea. In Halloween.
Okay.
She cast Jamie Lee Curtis, who is Debra Hill's biggest fan.
Oh yeah.
If you watch any interview about Jamie Lee Curtis talking about Debra Hill, Jamie Lee Curtis loves Debra Hill. She always talks about her like she's the greatest person ever, because she basically started her career.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, Halloween and this movie, The Fog, definitely were like kickstarted Jamie Lee Curtis's career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she knows it, and she talks about that, and apparently even after Debra Hill passed away, at every like Halloween event that Jamie Lee Curtis attends, she always tries to bring up Debra Hill and always gives her like as much credit as she can.
Right.
So she's her biggest advocate, really.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really touching. Actually.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so-
she definitely doesn't get talked about nearly as much as I think is necessary.
Debra Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Jamie Lee Curtis knows that.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, you watch Halloween and you watch this movie and then you watch like Escape from New York and things like that. Like you see Debra Hill's name popping up all over the thing in like different credited roles too. Like
Yeah, she does tons
and like
of stuff.
it's like she does tons of stuff and she's clearly doing a lot, but it doesn't get talked about. I feel like.
Yeah, she gets shafted, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Most.
Because John Carpenter is such like a big like personal brand.
Yeah,
Almost.
definitely.
It kind of overshadows her, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously the major inherent sexism of the industry at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
that almost
I
goes
mean-
without saying, which is
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what, this is 1978 Halloween was?
1970, yeah, 7 or 8.
Yeah, yeah, so...
Like basically no
definitely
women
there.
in the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
acutely and still is very acutely aware of that.
Yeah.
And the importance of people like Debra Hill.
Yeah, like, and Debra Hill was like a huge advocate for like women in film. She gave like a notable speech for like an organization called Women in Film or something, and it was notable being like people said like, yeah, she said like, hopefully there'll come a day when it can just be people in film and we won't have to use that identifier.
That's a very poignant thing.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
but what's kind of depressing is like 10 years later, like 2015, one of the other co-founders said like, oh yeah, we still need women in film. We're not nearly anywhere close.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You know, this is even before the fucking Weinstein shit.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah,
I mean,
no, we're nowhere close to not needing that.
Yeah.
We're still nowhere close to not needing to acknowledge that. Like, Oscar-winning female director.
Yeah, exactly.
Is really embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's really embarrassing.
It was
What,
like the
what was it?
85th Oscars or something.
Yeah.
It was oh my god, I can't believe like I'm the worst. Like my first thought is like the most like inherently sexist thought.
What?
I was like, oh yeah, who was that? Oh yeah, James Cameron's wife.
Oh, what? Yeah.
Or ex-wife.
You're talking about the Hurt Locker,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. The Hurt Locker. Yeah.
Did she
Like,
win
that
that?
was like.
I can't remember.
I was like
It's,
an adult when that was a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, why am I blanking on her name though? That's so irritating.
Bigelow or
There's
There's a
Bigelow?
B in there.
I thought it was Bigelow.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't know
know.
how to pronounce it.
I think Bigelow sounds
Bigelow? Yeah, okay, we'll go with that.
sounds more reasonable.
Yeah, she won 2009, and it was funny because it was the same year that Avatar was there, and Avatar
Oh, yeah.
was
Did it-
nominated, and it was kind of hilarious because Hurt Locker won Best Picture, and she won Best Director or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
she was,
obviously, Avatar got the money. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Um.
Actually, it kind of astounds me, like, how much. I don't want to. Maybe I will dig at James Cameron because I think he deserves it. But yeah, it kind of astounds me how much money James Cameron has done. Where like I don't think any of his movies really deserve like the amount of commercial success that he's got.
He's just like those two films, really. Like, I mean, obviously he's made tons of like high-grossing films,
Yeah,
but like
obviously Titanic and Avatar.
Titanic and Avatar were the kind of the ones that boosted his.
And those were the biggest investment to make as well.
Yeah.
Like he broke his own record in spending money to make the film.
Yeah.
Anyway, so digs at James Cameron aside. Let's
Yeah.
continue.
So
we want to
yeah,
get back
back
to
to
Debra Hill.
Yeah, we're still kind of in the Halloween
Right.
period.
Yeah.
This is just after Halloween. Halloween's obviously a huge box office success, but it happens really slowly apparently, because like the way it was screened, because it's such a small production company and such an independent process that they would kind of release it on staggered dates. So, like, they'd take all the reels to, like, one city and release it for a while, then take a bunch of reels to another city and release it there, because they just didn't have enough reels to do, like, a...
Right, because duplicating film is fucking expensive.
Yeah.
Like, I looked into this a while ago, and, like, even... I mean, now, actually, it's probably more expensive than it was back then, but, like, it's really fucking expensive. Like,
Yeah. They made, like, what? Like, 77 million or something like that? I don't
60
know.
to 70 million, somewhere around there, yeah.
Right.
But yeah. But see, this is playing in like mostly sort of smaller theaters and things like that, right?
Yeah, at first, but
Like
it eventually...
this was sort of one of those midnight movies for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was... Critics didn't really like it, like, initially.
Well, I mean, they can go fuck themselves, but like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever. That's clearly defines nothing.
Yeah.
So they weren't really sure when they started making The Fog. But at Mimi, as you mentioned earlier, they were in London for the London Film Festival, and they decided to visit Stonehenge.
Stonehenge, where the demons...
The demons dwell, where the banshees live, and they do live well.
I would say we should do that movie at some point, but it might be too obvious.
Oh, we have to do that movie.
Yeah,
at some point.
we'll do it.
I still think Star Chaser: Legend of Warren.
Oh, Star Chaser's on there as well. That's a great movie.
Demons live, and they do. Sorry, the banshees live, and they do live well. What happened there?
Yeah, well, the demons were dwelling there for sure because they went to Stonehenge apparently, and it was like this really creepy vibe, and it was like kind of misty. And then they like looked out over a
there
hill,
was some
and apparently
fog rolling
there was like
in?
a huge
fog bank. rolling in. Yeah.
And Carter, like, you know, elbowed Debra Hill and was like, "What do you think's in there? Like, what's creeping in there?" And they that's obviously where the idea for the film came from.
Which is you can see them being there so clearly, and like the whole aesthetic and vibe of this film. It's like so clear what they were seeing there.
Yeah, exactly. But before they are able to make this film, Carpenter's hired to make a 4 TV movie.
Oh, I know this one.
It's called Someone's Watching Me.
Oh, wait, no, this is a different
with an
made-for-TV
exclamation
movie
point.
that I'm thinking
What
of.
movie were you thinking of?
I'm thinking of Elvis.
Oh, yeah, he made that movie as well. He made these 2 movies in a short period. He made Elvis, and he made Someone's Watching Me with an exclamation point.
Right.
But he apparently wrote Someone's Watching Me specifically for Adrienne Barbeau.
Oh, yes?
Who we will find out will go on to star
we'll get to her.
in The Fog.
Yeah.
He had like seen her on TV, and he kind of like wrote this role with her in mind, called her, and she was like, yeah, I'm into it. So they made this TV movie called Someone's Watching Me.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
then
did Debra Hill write that as well?
No, she wasn't involved in that film, I don't think.
Okay, what about Elvis?
I don't think so either.
Okay.
Maybe though. I'm not sure. I didn't see that come up at all.
Right, but yeah, obviously Elvis has Kurt Russell in it, who is a
Kurt Russell in it, yeah.
Who would later be a frequent collaborator with John Carpenter.
Yeah, he Escape from New York, The Thing, Escape from L.A.
Yeah.
What's the other one? Big Showdown.
Big
Showdown.
China. Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, that's a weird movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, Carpenter, so he writes this film for Barbeau, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name. I think it is.
I think it Barbeau. I mean,
Barbeau.
Very minor difference, but...
Anyway, they meet, and this area is very foggy as well.
Foggy.
They meet, Hill and Carpenter break up.
Yeah.
And then Carpenter marries Adrienne Barbeau.
Yep.
And they were married at the time they were filming The Fog.
Right, so Barbeau and him were married at the time.
They were married before, even before they started filming.
Right. Okay.
So this really brief period in like 1979.
Yeah.
And yeah, Hill and Carpenter get a second deal with Avco to make a second movie with a much bigger budget than Halloween because it was successful. They get $1 million this time, a whopping $1 million.
Wow.
Which is, that's like 300% more than Halloween.
Yeah. I mean,
something like that.
But it also has a much more ambitious special effects.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Situation.
I mean, yeah. So Halloween was about 300,000, and this is about $1 million. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's the millions. That's production budget. That's not accounting the advertising budget.
Yeah,
as you mentioned,
but,
they did have like a $3 or $4 million advertising budget.
I think with like the reshoots, they brought it up to about 1.1 million.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Total for everything.
Right.
So yeah, so they write The Fog, and Carpenter writes the lead role for his new wife Barbeau.
Mm-hmm.
She's cast as the lead.
Stevie Wayne. Yeah, I practice.
Yeah, you missed your calling, Jake.
I mean, I'm kind of doing it right now, aren't I?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not on radio, although we'll get it on the air.
I wouldn't even be remotely surprised if you actually had a transmitter.
I do, but it's not very powerful. Nobody will hear us.
That was correct.
Yeah, you'd have to be on the same block.
Exactly.
As we were.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so Debra Hill Debra.
Cursed.
So
There's a curse?
Curse.
Well,
Debra
there is a
Hill
curse.
curses
but it's,
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Really?
No,
is
so
it, is
she
it
casts.
about, is it that a bunch of dead sailors would come back and, 100 years from now and kill her?
It hasn't been 100 years, so we'll see if Jamie Lee Curtis comes back as a ghost and tries to kill everybody. Then we'll know that she was cursed.
Right, okay.
But no, Debra Hill casts Jamie Lee Curtis in that role as well.
Good
And
casting.
they also cast, since they figured they had her, and they wanted to work with her. They also cast Janet Leigh,
Right.
Jamie Lee Curtis'
Yes.
mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, was in the film Psycho, I believe.
Yeah, she was
She
the
was.
she was the connective tissue there.
Yes.
Yes, she says she said that she's still afraid of showers after.
After
Yeah.
Janet Leigh is?
That's
Yeah.
reasonable.
Because didn't
Really?
I don't know too much about that film, but didn't he terrorize his actors? Like he was very
Hitchcock?
cute. Yeah, he was
I
kind
know,
of
yeah,
Kubrick-y
he
in
could
that.
definitely be like that.
Like that's where Kubrick got it. Really was from Alfred Hitchcock, terrorizing his actors to get really good.
Yeah. Well,
results out
I'm
of
sure
them.
it wasn't just because of trying to get the good.
No,
shot,
but
yeah, he definitely did that. I think that's gonna happen. Knowing, sorry, that filming the scene and seeing all the cameras and everything that you would that would kind of desensitize you to the whole
you'd
scare
think,
factor
but,
about it. But maybe she just associates it with being terrorized by Hitchcock.
yeah, I mean,
So-
Shelley Duvall,
Oh no, yeah, she was
isn't she doesn't remember it poorly because she was afraid. She was just abused by Kubrick and Nicholson throughout the whole.
She just associates
production.
that whole thing with
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
But I mean, Janet Leigh didn't maybe she hides it well, but she didn't seem she seemed that she was talking about it fondly.
right,
in that
okay.
film.
Yeah.
Not every time, but I'd say 1 out of 10 times I'm in a shower. I think about that scene.
You think about that scene? in
Especially if you're in one with a curtain, if
Yeah.
you don't have the protective slidey glass door, you're I could
Yeah.
die here.
Do you ever occasionally check on the other side? Do you act on it?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Psycho? Then
Well, it doesn't matter.
We're getting in there.
how are I mean, unless there's some kind of ghost pirate, or sorry, not pirate. I keep saying pirate. Ghost sailor.
You think they would be pirates?
kind of
That's the
assume
thing.
that.
Is so much about
They
it
seem like pirates.
indicates pirates.
There's this whole bit where they have the pirate ship. Not pirate. That's the pirate ship.
Exactly. It
They
looks
have
like
this ship come out of the fog, and then I mean, and watching that scene, I was like, oh my god, this ship must look like garbage because they're only showing it and they only show it for that
Well,
one scene.
that brings us actually to our next point. I think Mimi mentioned this earlier. They did a take of this. They filmed this movie. They finished it off. John Carpenter watched the final cut, and he was like,
Yeah.
this is terrible."
yeah. Yeah, this is actively terrible, and it's not scary enough. And
So initially he was gunning for a PG rating, which I think they initially they were trying to tell.
This would be the first PG rating that he would have ever
Yeah.
got, I imagine.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Precinct 13 has a 6-year-old being shot in the face, and then there's boobs in Halloween.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
funny how those things are ranked as equally scandalous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry,
it's
what? Oh, a 6-year-old being shot in the face and boobs.
Yeah, it's in the
You're right.
and the fact that you just listed it so matter-of-factly too is good.
Sorry, but yeah, no, that's just the way the MPAA does
Yeah.
it. It's kind of strange. Now that I think
The only
about it.
thing more heinous than child murder. Boobs.
Well, specifically nipples. If
Yeah, that's true. Specifically, yeah.
Definitely not.
if there
not kosher.
if there's no nips, it can be G, for Christ's sake.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
initially they had intended.
So actually, sorry, in Assault on Precinct 13, they have a child getting murdered, and then in Halloween, they have a child doing the murdering.
Interesting switch.
Well, technically, Debra Hill doing the murdering.
Yeah. Debra
Right.
Hill's
I mean, it's implied that it's a...
Yeah.
tiny little hands.
Yeah, tiny little hands. Just knowing that those are her tiny hands makes me very happy.
Yeah.
And they do that weird camera effect, that like kind of almost fisheye effect to make them look a little smaller too, I think.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I think we're going to get to this, but... Oh, no, we won't, because we're not talking about...
We keep forgetting.
But yeah, so I know they shot that thing with a Steadicam, right?
Yeah, they did.
So I'm just thinking of like, what would Debra Hill have had to do to get in between the camera operator and the Steadicam and put her hands like right
yeah,
there?
it would have been a very awkward.
There's-
You have to, like,
It
There
would've
was some
been a very
awkward upright
like,
spooning.
shooting.
yeah, she probably had to
Yeah.
climb onto the operator's back and like. And she,
Yeah, the operator being Dean
Yeah.
Cundy, by the way, who we will talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. So initially, when they were writing this film, the idea of the villain was a lot less defined. There weren't. They didn't really conceptualize these beings within the fog. It was more kind of like a mysterious fog rolls over and people start dying. So, I'm not exactly sure, but it was.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they never released this cut,
Yeah.
so it's hard to know for sure.
But
The fact that you say that, though, is very interesting because I think that there's still definitely elements of that
Yeah.
in the final cut because they definitely don't flesh them out as realized villains.
well, yeah, as
At
you
all?
said,
I mean, yeah.
they after John Carpenter saw this cut, he was like, "Oh, this is unworkable." They went back and did a bunch of reshoots, and basically what they did after when they reworked it was they made these sailors, the actual kind of villains, these zombie-like creatures in the fog. Like essentially any close-up shot of violence was shot after. Any the whole
really?
scene with the clipper ship, the mast ship, three-masted ship,
Okay.
that was shot afterwards. The whole murder scene
So
on
what
the seagrass
about the bits?
was shot later.
The bits where the priest is reading the diary.
I think that's from the initial, like, because I
okay.
think the general story was
Yeah.
there, like about that.
Okay.
But I think I don't
But they didn't show the.
know.
So that's a lot of reshoots.
Yeah, well, as Mimi was
Yeah,
saying, like,
it's like a third of the movie ended
Yeah, wow.
up being
That's more than I
reshoots.
would have thought. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's actually really surprising, and I didn't know that when I initially watched it. For my second viewing of it, I did know that, and it's really, really
it
apparent.
is, yeah.
And you can pick them out really easily.
Extent that was done. Yeah.
Especially is a reshoot. Like, there's a lot of close shots, especially for the violence, and it gives it like this weird kind of claustrophobic
Yeah.
feeling that you originally think is kind of a strategy for like coy storytelling.
Yeah.
But then it's because they haven't actually fully realized these guys
Yeah, and
as
they-
villains, and it wasn't written with that intent. Feel really like when they first come in, especially in that scene like on the seagrass, and you kind of see like their outlines, you're like, okay, they're not quite ready to reveal them fully yet. Like, they're not quite ready to like show you the full monster, you know, when like they're like just psyching you up for the monster.
They didn't have a monster really.
They weren't ready, and that's why there never really feels like there's a full whole reveal with them, and that they're ever fully realized, is because they're just not.
You get a scene with them all kind of standing
Yeah,
up. at the end.
but but it doesn't really have the same impact. You're not like,
Yeah.
especially for the fact that they wrote them in as lepers. I found really
Yeah.
interesting because like they're not
that
pirates.
doesn't really
The fact
come
that they're
across.
it doesn't come across, and I find it strange that they included it because they're not going to visually utilize the inherent horror of
Yeah.
leprosy.
I mean, I think the idea was just to make to make the act of murdering them sound even more heinous.
Yeah, but I just find it interesting. Like, it definitely it makes it more tragic, but I was really surprised that they didn't utilize that like in a more body horror way.
Well,
when they were showing.
Well, I mean, it's not a David Cronenberg movie.
No. But when they went back to do the reshoots, they were almost entirely out of time. So all the reshoots, like a third of the movie, was shot in like a much shorter time period than the rest of it.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely constraints. I mean, that's the case with this movie, and that's definitely the case with Halloween as well. There are definitely like sort of external constraints on what happens in the movie that have to do with time and budget and things like that. I mean, and Halloween, luckily, kind of worked despite that. And I mean, I would say this movie worked pretty well as well. But
ways in which it worked, in some ways in which it didn't. I feel like as a story almost being told to you, this works. But as like a horror movie with actual monsters in it, in a lot of ways, I don't think it works fully. Like, it works, like, it would almost work, like, as a book, I think, really well, better than something that's relying on, like, visual horror.
Like a book almost like a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, like something where, like, ambiance and suspense can be built, but you don't need that visual payoff of there being a monster. Like, that's the thing. It's just, like, you wait and wait and wait for this monster, and then it's, like, not fully there. And it's not what you thought it would be. The way it's built up and the details that are included seem almost arbitrary in the final realization of the monster.
And they were under this pressure to make it more gory. And because, like, contemporary films at the time were, like, coming out. They're way more
they're
gory,
all bloodbaths.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, and I would definitely say also the audience that like enjoyed Halloween or whatever were definitely used to a very like exploitation style film.
Yeah.
Like slow burn, suspense, ambiance, atmosphere.
Definitely.
Like it was a lot more heavy on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, this film is like it really illustrates all of the people involved who were talented. It illustrates their talents really well, but it also illustrates their faults. Like,
it's very polarized. Yeah, there's a lot of really good things about this movie and a lot of terrible things about this movie.
I think the major problem with this movie is like the script just wasn't finished. Like it just doesn't feel finished.
This movie actually is like, I thought if they like kind of trimmed it down a little bit, like. I feel like we don't get enough time to sit with any of the characters.
Yeah, I agree. Because
I feel like they have too many different parallel storylines.
Yeah, exactly. One of the first things I remember saying to Keaton when I first watched this movie, not having done any research, was that I think that this story needed either more characters or less characters.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot, we had a lot of kind of, like, mid-ground characters, none of which we knew super well, and then we had, like, no extras in the important moments of the movie where extras would have helped. Yeah. You know? Like, we had extras in, like, the moments where they were, like, doing the little town ceremony and stuff, but then as soon as any of the action happened, then they were missing, and that was really, really noticeable for me.
Right.
Yeah. Like,
so the way I would have done it is I would have had it so that it was basically just 3 characters, which is you have with Nick Castle, I guess, and what's Jamie Lee Curtis's character in this movie?
Elizabeth Sully.
Yeah,
which is that I was unclear if that's supposed to be like a harbinger of like the Elizabeth Dane, like that she's bringing it back. Like I was wondering about that.
Maybe it is.
I don't know.
Because the way she says her name, like the way she's like, she's hesitant to say her name, and then she's like Elizabeth, and I'm like, is that like significant? Is she supposed to be like a harbinger of this?
Yeah,
I suppose we'll never know because we don't see the original cut.
They said I think it was John Carpenter said it in an interview. It was supposed to be like a little bit of like, oh look, she's come to town and everything's started to change. Like she is kind of a harbinger,
right?
In a way,
because I mean they do address that.
In a story sense, she is
in a campfire
triggering
story
it
kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she is the change in the status quo that allows the story to kind of move in the way it does.
my point anyway is that she doesn't actually get enough screen time.
No, not at all.
really.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
you know, by far the most competent.
Yeah. So, but anyway, what I would have done is I would have trimmed it down to just her and Nick Castle, and then Stevie Wayne on KAB.
Needed.
Basically, talk to the priest, and like you could
Yeah,
easily
exactly.
have friggin' Jamie Lee Curtis talking to the priest.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't. They only really need those other two characters for that exchange with Father Malone, where he's
Exactly,
reading
yeah.
them the journal. That's the only part
but
where they actually
you
are
could just
necessary.
you could just have Elizabeth and Nick go up there.
Yeah,
and talk to
exactly.
the-
Like their parts could be interchangeable, but for
Exactly,
some
yeah.
reason they felt that it needed to be.
Yeah.
Character for her. Like, they just wanted her in the film,
Yeah,
so they
exactly.
created this character.
They want. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah. I guess. Yeah.
Which is very obvious because she doesn't really need to be there. She's fun to watch. Being credited as Nancy Loomis, who is unfortunately, I think, the worst actress
Yeah. She's not great.
in the whole thing. And reading that she had worked with them in a lot of stuff after that really surprised me. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I thought you were kind of one of,
I thought you
unfortunately,
were bad.
yeah, I thought you were kind of one of the weakest links to this whole
Yeah.
thing. Unfortunately, her and the child actor were, to me, like, the biggest standouts of, like, bad acting.
Oh yeah, he wasn't great.
He was... In my notes, I literally wrote, "This neat piece of wood," in all caps.
Yeah.
To remember just the bizarre... It's a weird line, like, no one could have delivered that line right. And then
No.
that kid delivered it the worst that line could possibly
You
be
didn't think it could be
delivered.
that bad, and then it did. You thought, yeah,
Like, it's a stupid line, but it's also read in the worst way.
yeah. I thought it was bad, but you exceeded my expectations.
Leon, I remember, like, his first scene texting Mimi, because she watched it before I did, actually, I think. Texting her being like, oh, it's rough. Like, it's hard to watch him
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, his character could have been cut out. Why did, like...
Oh, he was unnecessary. It was completely unnecessary.
I mean, there's the whole.
Where they
I
go to
feel-
save him, but they
yeah.
could have easily...
Yeah.
He could have just easily been some kid she knew about. Like, because she didn't...
Yeah, he
Yeah.
doesn't need to be in many.
Because her
other
reaction, like, with the like, at the radio station, when she's trying to, like, save him, is, like, honestly not that moving of a scene. It's like...
No,
things.
it isn't.
No,
And, like,
no.
they don't really do anything to establish their relationship either. Like, they don't really have, like,
Yeah.
No,
not at
he
all.
wakes her up in one scene, and that's literally the only scene they have
Yeah.
together, is her saying, like, oh, you found this wood? This neat piece of
Yeah.
wood? Oh, you're kind of annoying. And then the scene ends.
I mean-
And you're like, okay, so then, like, her emotional response in the later scenes is just like, honestly, I hate this kid so much.
I will-
I'm in
I will
favor
say-
of the ghosts getting him.
That's a rather neat piece of wood. Like,
Sorry. That was one of my favorite points in the movie, was that line.
like there's
rather neat.
there's the whole scene where they have like the water coming out of the wood,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and then the piece of wood catches fire. And I was actually thinking about like how would they have done that
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
the water kind of bubbling up through the wood. And I think what they must have done is tiny little holes and then kind of pumped it through.
Yeah, that was what I would have assumed too.
And so they must have used like a really tiny drill bit for that. But yeah.
Quickly that whole scene went by. Like, it seemed really rushed to me.
Yeah.
Rewind it to, like, get the full information load of that scene.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Because that's the one time you're hearing directly from the villain.
Yeah.
Oh, the bit on the voice on the tape recorder you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw that the first time
Yeah.
I was watching it. Like, I was just like,
No.
okay, I actually need to rewatch this to, like, take in all the information. Because, like, so much plot is actually delivered to you in that scene, and it's over in, like, a second.
Yeah.
So, like, I found both viewings I did. So I watched that scene, like, 4 times, at least.
Yeah.
In order to make sure I was, like, not missing
Understanding
anything.
what's happening.
Yeah, fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah, it's definitely kind of weird.
Like, the first time I saw it, this is probably more about me than the movie, but I literally didn't even see that it said 6 must die.
Yeah.
I was just I was just distracted by the fact that it was the piece of wood, and I was like, why did she bring this with her?
But more than 6 people die in this movie, I think.
No, actually, only 6 people die in this movie.
I feel like I was doing
More people should die in this movie, but only 6 people die.
They try to kill Stevie Wayne, but I guess she doesn't die.
Yeah.
She just gets stabbed in the shoulder and then just is fine.
Dean Cundy, because we're getting into some of the territory. Yeah, exactly. So, Jake, if you wanna tell us a little bit about this character, Dean Cundy.
I did some research on this man, Dean Cundy, legend. It's because I only bother to look into the legends. No one else is worth my time.
I'm sure he's very flattered.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So we kind of talk about like we were kind of getting at this is that there's kind of like a group of people that are kind of involved in like a couple different movies that happen, starting with Assault on Precinct 13 and then going into some of the later John Carpenter movies. And one of the most prominent figures sort of in that group is Dean Cundy. So Dean Cundy was the director of photography on The Fog, the movie that we're doing, and he was also the director of photography on Halloween.
One of the reasons Debra Hill hired him
is because he owned a bunch of gear. Because as we were saying, we were talking about the penny pinching earlier, and basically, so basically, Dean Cundy he drove around in this van that was full of a bunch of gear, and then like because basically they were trying to save as much money as possible, they hired him basically because he owned a camera. Yeah, and it works, and I mean he's actually but the interesting thing I find about Dean Cundy is because we have sort of this group of people like Debra Hill and John Carpenter, and like as successful as John Carpenter kind of was, like he never kind of broke out of that that the kind of genre cult films kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like obviously Debra Hill did not another exception in addition to Dean Cundy would be also Jamie Lee Curtis obviously did as well.
Yeah.
But Dean Cundy definitely moved on to bigger and better things, which I find most interesting.
Yeah, what else did he do?
Called, I don't know, Jurassic Park. Photography Jurassic Park, and he talks about like when he was doing that, he learned a lot from working with John Carpenter and trying to make all these rubber these rubber creatures look real, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Did he do?
Very interesting.
He did do the thing.
Okay, wow.
He did pretty much. Okay, so as far as John Carpenter,
hand in both of those is very clear, and I think it's probably what's one of the best things about both of those movies.
Yeah, so Dean Cundy, as far as John Carpenter movies, did Halloween. He did The Fog. He did Halloween 2. He did The Thing.
Wow.
I really want to watch Jurassic Park again knowing that information.
Yeah, it does change things a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me want to like look for his kind of style, because he definitely has a style in all of those movies.
Yeah, so basically he did he would try to do all the lighting to make the rubber look real and stuff like that, and then he worked with the CGI people to try to advise them on how to make their CGI match the real thing.
So he kind of like midwifed the transition between practical and CGI effects.
Yeah, wow.
Yes, yeah, I would say
That's
so.
quite something. Yeah.
I know, what a fucking pro. And so
that's wild.
Yeah, not only did he do that, but I mean, I assume Spielberg had used him on Jurassic Park because he'd previously shot Hook with him.
Oh, really?
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
That's where
Yeah.
it comes up again.
Yeah.
That's our other Hook connection.
Yeah.
And Dean Cundy also worked on a couple other movies you may have heard of, like Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3.
I did know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That is very good.
He worked on another movie, which I know you've heard of because it's Apollo 13.
Yeah, I can't believe
I can't believe we didn't mention that when we were doing
like
the podcast on.
given it got a little bloated towards the end, so
Yeah, but,
perhaps it's for the best, and we got to talk about him now.
Director of photography, but he's an excellent director of photography in Zero Gravity.
That's
So
Not
not
many
many people can put that on their resume that they
Yeah.
shot a film in Zero Gravity.
Yeah,
that's
just
wild.
quick throwback for Mimi. I don't know. A lot of the Apollo 13 shots were shot in zero gravity. If you weren't familiar with
I
that,
never was actually sure how they did that.
So they did it on a plane.
Yeah, they just
that would
dived the
fly
plane a
for
bunch of
hours.
times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. Not bad for a dude who started out because he had a camera in a van.
He had a camera and a van. And eventually, he's basically an astronaut.
And Deborah Hill liked him.
Yeah. He was nominated for the Academy Award for his work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
What?
Really. That was
Yeah.
He wasn't nominated for other things, just Roger Rabbit.
No, it was just Roger Rabbit. Well, I mean,
my
for in terms of Academy Awards, yeah.
Right.
That's very strange, actually.
That is weird. Did he win?
Yeah,
He win.
and so one of the things I find interesting about Dean Cundy is like I think he worked really well with John Carpenter because I mean like I've seen some interviews with him and like he seems to have very much the same like really dry sense of humor that John Carpenter does.
Yeah.
And like even though obviously I think Dean Cundy was probably more successful in terms of like getting to work on really big movies than he was, they both seem rather a little bit bitter about the whole industry.
Yeah. I do kind of get that vibe from watching interviews with both of them.
Yeah, and so he did like basically almost every John Carpenter movie.
There's definitely a style that I think that he brings to us that's almost synonymous with Carpenter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
especially as Jake said, because of all those earlier films when Carpenter was like really kind of setting his, creating his aesthetic and his style is pretty much like the visual representation of that is Dean Cundy's work. So
Yeah, and I mean, as we were talking about earlier, we were talking about Halloween, the intro bit with the where
the
Debra
Steadicam.
Hill had to put her hands. in the Steadicam.
yeah.
So like apparently like he just owned a Steadicam and that's why they did that.
Yeah, like he had a bunch of equipment, not just a camera.
It's
He had
just
tons of
like,
equipment as well, like the Steadicam.
The Steadicam was a Panaglide version of the Steadicam situation, and they the lights while they were doing that one take because so it all basically happens in one shot. So they start outside of the house, and then they look in, and so they see one thing happening. And then so as he's coming around the house, they have to move all the lights so that when he comes into the house, the lighting is set up for the exposure that they have inside the house.
Oh my gosh.
That's a maneuver. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they
That's
had
a really long shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they actually the actual scene in the movie, there was a cut in there, but that was only so that they could splice two different takes together.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, but they actually did have to do the whole thing. As
Wow.
one move.
Like, I was impressed enough by, like, the remake that they did in 2018, doing some pretty good long shots, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
like to imagine doing it with like the first version of that technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
And then what I find interesting is like, how did they get Debra Hill into there so that she could put her hands in?
I don't know.
pretty funny looking.
Was she just like standing in front of him the whole time?
Just kind of like shuffling along.
Like, I have to imagine that there's like some set photographs of it, because it must have been hilarious.
It must have been silly, yeah. Now that I've gone through a little bit of that, would you say it's fair to call him a legend?
Yeah, it's totally fair.
Yeah, okay.
Totally
Yeah.
fair.
It definitely makes me want to watch the remake of 2018 again and see where they're mimicking his style from the original Halloween. Like, I'd be very interested to see kind of like how they try and represent that, because that is such a huge part of that movie's identity.
Just me, that is like, every time you say his name, it's really hard to not think of the dirty word.
Yeah.
That his name vaguely sounds like.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but Dean. Okay, let's look at the. How do you pronounce this?
Is it Kundi?
Kundi? I don't think so. No, it's got to be Kundi.
Dean Kundi.
Dean Kundi.
That's a fine name, Dean Kundi. Not even remotely dirty at all.
It doesn't have the pronunciation next to his name.
Dean Kundi. As we mentioned earlier, there's many film techniques that are called upon regularly in Carpenter films, because of Dean Kundi, but also because of, like, you know, as we've been mentioning, this kind of clique of horror people. So I just wanted to mention a couple other people briefly who were involved in some of that early work. You got production designer and editor on The Fog, Tommy Lee Wallace. He also worked on Halloween as production designer and editor as well. He also would go on. He kind of took over the Halloween mantle he wrote and directed Halloween 3, because Debra Hill and John Carpenter were kind of like, they were like, we can't continue the franchise.
Yeah. It got weird very quickly.
I could imagine being tired of it at that point.
Yeah. It strays pretty far from what I think they initially intended.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only reason they like signed on to even produce it, I think, was because they were like, I don't want Michael Myers to even be in it. Like, it's got to be a different. Right. So Tommy Lee Wallace wrote and directed that. He also would go on to write and direct the It miniseries. A little bit later. Another guy who's kind of cool, who was involved in The Fog, is a guy named Rob Bottin.
Yeah.
Bottin. I don't really know how you pronounce it.
Bottin.
Bottin. He worked as a makeup effects supervisor on The Fog. And he played the evil ghost pirate.
I remember seeing the little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because apparently he like expressed a bit of a role, he expressed a bit of a want to be in the film. He was like, oh, maybe I could have a small little role in the film. And Carpenter was like, stand up. And he did, thinking Carpenter was gonna be like, get out of here. You're not gonna do it. But Carpenter was like, yeah, you're about the right size.
Because he was like 6'5".
Yeah. Well, I mean, they definitely didn't want to hire any new actors because of the budget. So
it's like, you're already here. You can do it.
This guy already had kind of the beginnings of a special effects career. He had already worked on Star Wars as like not a consultant, as like an assistant makeup assistant. He worked on Star Wars. He worked on Fury. He worked on Piranha. All before he worked on The Fog. And then after The Fog, he would go on to work on the Twilight Zone movie. He did, this is interesting, he did the he was in charge of the special and creature effects for The Thing. He was in charge of that whole operation.
Yeah, that's a pretty big job.
Yeah. So actually he probably him and Dean Kundi probably learned a lot from each other about how you would film effects like that.
Yeah.
RoboCop. RoboCop 3, he worked on The Great Outdoors with John Candy. Basic Instinct, Mission Impossible, Fight Club, Charlie's Angels, tons of stuff. So he's a prolific figure who kind of got his start from that clique.
Super well showcased in The Fog.
Part of that was, as we said earlier, it was kind of speedily shot, so I
Yeah.
don't know that it was the kind of stuff you'd want to fully.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that's the thing. Like, if he'd been given more time and budget, I'm sure it would have been very impressive. Like, if the film was shot with those things even intended to be in it in the first place, it would have been cool. Like, I'm sure he could have done something very interesting, and I feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity.
Being like, yeah, we're gonna do these ghost sailors. He could have really flushed out some cool fucking shit.
Yeah.
But
And especially, like, when you first hear that that's what the story's gonna be, you get so excited for that.
Yeah.
You get so excited for the concept, and when you first see that ship, you're like, oh god, it's like, it looks like Pirates of the Caribbean here, like, this is excellent.
yeah.
And then you just never see it again, and it's like, oh.
It's a bit disappointing.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I wanted the ghost ship. But
Yeah, definitely.
I want the leprosy pirates.
They're like some of the people who had like a pretty major effect on the John Carpenter feel that we were talking about, that kind of atmosphere that he creates. And I think like we should talk a little bit about like how he actually does this, like particularly in relation to The Fog. Like the types of things he uses, like you said, he does use a Steadicam. It's not quite as
obvious as in Halloween, but
low pans, like even at the beginning when they like that
Yeah, that's the
shot.
entire beginning, like, third of that movie almost, is like all these like panning establishing shots.
In all his movies, he kind of establishes an atmosphere by doing these like slow pans across a room and like, you know, showing you what's in it and like stuff like that. Like the montage at the beginning of this movie, that kind of ghostly poltergeisty montage, is all these just like, you know, slow pans over this sleepy fishing town. About his lighting, the use of lighting, which I think probably is mostly Dean Cundy's work, but in terms of pulling it off, I don't really know whose idea it comes from initially. It's hard to say. That's kind of where the director and the
on that.
Word.
depends on the type of people you're talking about, but I think this is one of the instances where the line is particularly blurred.
Yeah, also especially because given the budget, everybody wears a lot of hats.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't have like a lighting crew or whatever.
Yeah. I just thought they made really good use of like the shadows in this film.
Like, what are you specifically thinking of?
Well, there's that, like, they just do a lot of hard cuts from like, or not cuts exactly, but hard shifts from like super dark to like there's like a really focused light that's casting a dramatic shadow. Like the scene when Nick Castle is about to, like, you think he might be killed by the ghost because he's like the fog's in front of his house and it's the day before, and like his clock breaks. There's that like scene where like all of a sudden like the light comes on him and it's like the shadow through the door, and it's like this is like, I don't know, there's a bunch of shots like where they kind of use shadows and this like dramatic change of lighting.
The fog moving over stuff too.
Yeah,
is
like
used
really
a lot.
stark. Yeah.
They also did like a lot of like color filters in different scenes, like where they're like they'd be looking at like a console or something and like their face is all lit up red or green, like depending on where they are.
That's another thing, is like these kind of like tonal lighting that they use a lot in a lot of Carpenter films, earlier Carpenter films, like Halloween and The Thing as well has that a lot.
The entire area is like washed in one color, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This brings me, I wanted to ask you, Jake, they did a lot of, obviously, fog special effects. And it's
Think that they probably want to do at least a little bit of that in this movie.
yeah. And it is kind of interesting how they managed to do that. And I was wondering if you could maybe, if you had an idea how they might have done that.
So I was watching this, like how they might have done that, because I was looking at it and I was thinking, okay, you know, the fog in this shot definitely looks like it's not part of this shot. Like it to me, it looked like it was like kind of superimposed. So what I think, and also there was such a volume of fog that I think it would have been like sort of, you know, not necessarily feasible to create as much fog as they did.
Yeah. Well, because
So
you
I
have
think
these
they basically
big,
did it-
wide shots.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. This totally huge thing we forgot to mention is the aspect ratio that this film is shot in is
We got this far
It's
without
like-
talking about
Well,
that.
what? It's just a widescreen 2.35
like
to
anamorphic.
1 Panavision.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's like
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the Carpenter movies were done that way.
But it was
well,
particularly used in this one to give it the vibe that it wasn't super low budget.
Yeah, I mean, because Dean Cundy had a Panavision lens, so he just...
Yeah.
people would always say though, like you don't like it's not
Yeah.
an intuitive way to make a horror film because that type of shot makes close-ups
Makes
really
everything
hard
look-
to do.
Yeah.
Because you've got
yeah,
all
definitely.
that
Space.
space. But anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, I just thought that was an interesting point. Yeah, and they always use that extra space to have kind of something else going on, which I think is super cool, and it makes it look really good.
Or like something
Yeah.
like there's like the atmosphere encroaching on the character in some way.
I mean, and yes, it also definitely makes the film look less cheap.
Yeah, but sorry, you were
Lighting.
yeah. How you think they did it based on
So
watching it.
so I was thinking they basically did it in 3 ways. Into the scene and lit it. And I think that there are some
be a
some
good way to
scenes
do
which
it.
are that would be the obvious way, wouldn't it? But yeah, so there are some scenes like kind of in the lighthouse and stuff where they must have done that because I couldn't see how else they would have done it. And like that's fine because you're in an enclosed space, so like the fog's not gonna
Like if it's like a small
Yeah,
window.
exactly. Whenever you don't need a huge volume of fog, because generally if you do a lot of fog in a really large space, it's going to dissipate and it's not going to look very good.
hand.
Yes, I've done that in our amateur filmmaking experience. We've done that.
And to herd
Yeah.
the fog.
So the other thing that I think they must have done is, especially for that particular scene where the fog is coming in off the shore, is I think they must have used a model. Yeah, because it's not in that much detail. The thing is kind of dark and everything, and then there's some fog. So I think that's what they did there.
Shot in the film, and like the cheapest looking shot is that like kind of
Yeah.
when she's like looking out the window and like explaining where the fog's going.
Just entirely animated when I saw that.
Right.
It's not a good shot, and it really
No,
kind of
it's not
cheapens
great.
everything a little bit.
So, and then I think the final thing, and I think this is probably how they did most of the fog, was that they essentially shot a little bit of fog on a black background, zoomed in. And then by means of an optical printer, they must have superimposed that onto the actual original shot.
That's pretty accurate, I think. Do you want to know how they did that? Basically, for all the you were correct about like the smaller scenes are just
They're just a fog machine.
they're just a fog machine. They're
Dry ice or whatever.
yeah, a bunch of poor special effects people fanning fog all day, every day, into small spaces, trying to keep it contained.
Yeah.
So that was the first bit, but how they did those like bigger shots of like buildings and like the street and like the fog rolling into the bay. You were right. They did do it on a black background, but it was a little more complex than that. What they they did was they would take the shot, say they were doing it of somebody's house. It was the shot of whatever, I forget. I can't believe I'm blanking on the main character's name. Yeah. That shot of her house where like the fog starts to kind of envelop it. So they'd get the like standing shot of the house, and then they'd use that to construct like a black shape like of the house. They'd recreate the shape of the house on like a black background using like a black
pouring over the top of it, like we're
just
straight
like
on.
essentially cut out of like black paper or what?
Like a three-dimensional shape for the fog to interact with, and then they'd superimpose it.
Okay, yeah. Right. Okay.
like models based on the shapes of the things that the fog was supposed to interact with. And then they would like, so because on a smaller scale they could kind of cool the fog and make it a little bit more like lingering and like
more.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah, because
it.
obviously, if you had tried to actually cover that house in fog, that would have been insanely difficult. Because fog tends to fan out, you know, it tends to dissipate.
It's very cartoony in a lot of scenes because, like, the individual like curls of fog were so exaggerated. Like, and I think that's probably why it looked like that.
Yeah.
Kind of like weird and mystical, like because it glows in the shots, and it's like obviously real fog doesn't glow.
Yeah,
I don't know. I need to tell anyone that.
Yeah, my biggest confusion was like the difference in like how it looked when the characters were actually present with it versus how it looked in that terrible window shot. Like that, it just looked like somebody like painted a streak and then like animated it moving along this greenish black blob that was the land, apparently. Like, we only had her word on it that it was interacting with the town at all. Like, we couldn't see it. Yeah.
Like, it's going downtown, everybody go to the church. It's like, what are you talking about? It just looks like a blob on a blob.
Exactly. That was, I think, when I got really frustrated, was during that scene. I was just like, what is happening?
That's why everybody needs to tune into KAB so they can know what's going on with the
fog. This whole thing is just a cautionary tale about always being tuned into the radio.
Yeah.
Specifically, KAB.
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
Some other cool practical effects that they did were, I think you mentioned this when we were talking about it right after you watched the film, Mimi. That like kind of shots of the fog receding. Yeah,
how they like would reverse the fog, or like I love that one scene on the seagrass when they're trying to show it going on like to the underdeck area, like the engine room.
Yeah, getting sucked into
I really like that. I thought that was probably one of my favorite shots of the whole movie, actually, was just them putting it in there and then reversing it so it looked like it was like getting sucked in there. I thought that was really neat.
So when the fog...
So they just ran the film back.
Yeah, exactly,
When the fog receded, they ran it backwards. But what made it so interesting is that scene on top of the lighthouse where the fog recedes. It's got... Adrienne Barbeau in it, which means that she had to act that scene backwards, like the relief from the fog transitioning into the like what's going on, transitioning into like fear of the creatures.
Yeah,
it's like,
flailing around with the hook.
Yeah,
all of that acted backwards.
You're not allowed to. Well, not you can't really blink when you're doing that because blinking looks really weird when you reverse it.
Oh yeah, because I couldn't imagine reverse blinking.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Just all these like cool little things that they creatively figured out to on a budget make things look interesting. And like another thing that
I wonder if they considered before doing this movie how difficult it is to control fog.
Yeah, I don't know if they thought fully into it.
Yeah.
But
different personalities and different shots. Like, you could tell that there were days where it just wasn't, like, working with them. Or, like, looks thin and, like, it's been a while since it was, like, made or released.
But they're, like, running out
I'm
of
sorry,
fog.
John. We're out of dry ice. It's not coming out right today.
Takes in this that I was like really surprised by. Like there was a lot of takes like that didn't even have the fog, that were just like people talking, that I'm like, really? That take? That's what we're going with?
Making a film on a budget. Another way that John Carpenter totally like gave his films such distinct atmospheres and worked a bit on a budget was the fact that he made his own music for a lot of his films. Yeah, so it is fantastic. It's in my opinion, it's better than Halloween's music. Like,
I mean, he made some advances in terms of music making.
Well, why don't
when he got to that?
Why don't you tell us a bit about the music?
Enlighten us, Jake. Nothing but like two mirrors and that music.
Yeah, so welcome to the music section, aka John Carpenter is a hack, and how to write a John Carpenter theme in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, tell me how to write a John Carpenter theme in 30 seconds.
Okay, so as we know, I kid. John Carpenter was a fine composer. So as we know, John Carpenter had a bit of a musical background, and so he generally composed all the themes to his movies.
Like, I knew he did the early ones, but he did... Oh, really?
In fact, they even brought him back on the most recent Halloween movie just to do the music.
Oh, that's cool.
This music.
Yeah, as I was looking into him, I kind of noticed that.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever listened to his albums, his more recent albums, but Lost Themes 1 and 2, fantastic records.
Yeah,
check them out?
Yeah, is it just like
It would imply that it kind of is. So the idea is, basically, he made a bunch of music with his son as like themes to non-existent movies.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's a new material. New recordings of some of his more well-known scores. Did his music on keyboards. Generally in Halloween, it's a lot of piano, and actually there's a lot of piano in this movie as well. Basically, he got to doing scores because when he was working on student films, basically nobody else knew how to make music, so everybody else just asked, "Oh, hey John, you can do the music, right?" And so he ended up doing that, and
yeah.
Exactly. So it's a whole thing. It's a you do what you can do in these kind of low budget movies, and so he did a lot of piano stuff early on, but you can kind of hear starting in like actually even starting in Dark Star, he starts using synthesizers. And John Carpenter was saying like he likes to use synthesizers because
sound really, I think.
Yeah, he says he can sound big when it's just him.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And yeah, I definitely get that because it's definitely the way to go because you can tweak all these different things. And so specifically on the Fog, you can hear that he's definitely made an upgrade on his synthesizer setup. So basically, you can hear on the on Halloween that all the synthesizer is basically just like one note at a time. So he's using monophonic synthesizers, which were less advanced, so you could only play one note at a time. But you can hear in the Fog, in the themes, he sort of has like some polyphonic synthesizer lines played up high, and you can see that he probably took some of the money that he saved on Halloween by doing his own score, and some of the money he made, and he bought himself a big old polysynth. So these are analog synthesizers, unlike the digital synthesizers like the DX7, which which you may have heard of if you listen to the podcast.
Much about if you listen to the podcast.
Yeah. So as for the specific synthesizer that he used, I can't give you an actual answer, because although I strongly suspect that it is a Sequential Circuits Prophet 5, because I know that he owned one, and sorry, because I've seen a lot of photos of his studio, and when he was recording some of the later themes, not specifically this one, because there's actually not a lot of photos of this one. But moving on into this film specifically, he kind of talks about the whole production of this film in general, how he thought it was basically kind of a huge mess, like originally, and then he did the movie, and then he did a score, and then he thought it was just absolutely terrible and everything, and then they decided, okay, I'm gonna rescore it too. And so he has some help from his friend Dan Wyman, who also helped him do some of the mixing and such for Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween. Very simple melodic lines, but with like a really big kind of fat sound. That's kind of the I would say the general idea of most of his style, because it's like it's really rather like imposing, and it adds a lot to his movies, I think.
Tension I felt from the ending, like, few scenes of this movie was the soundtrack. Like, that was what was giving it all of its oomph and all of its, like, tension. Like, if you just had that stuff on its own, it wouldn't be scary, but that soundtrack made it really scary.
And yeah, I would say to most of his films, it adds a ton.
Beat and banging that kind of matched up with, like, the knocking on the lighthouse. Like, I thought that was really well done.
In fact, I think that his so well that I think it's funny that when they did The Thing, basically the studio wouldn't let him record his own soundtrack because it was like
insane.
Cool, because they were like, dude, no, we're not going to let you do the fucking soundtrack. You're too close to it, right? So they hired
reason to do the soundtrack.
Yeah, I know. So they hired Ennio Morricone, who is a legendary soundtrack writer. Worked on some movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, etc. And so then I think the funniest part is that Ennio Morricone essentially sits down, writes the whole thing, and then does a John Carpenter impression the whole time.
I thought he did for some reason. The music
no, because it sounds exactly like him. But it's in fact just Ennio Morricone, legendary Hollywood soundtrack writer, being like, "Oh, I really need to sound like fucking John Carpenter in a garage." Like,
the atmosphere became so tied in with that kind of like tinny synth, like that little, his whole atmosphere was tied in with that.
Yeah.
Which his films move, like, it always like makes perfect sense with like the soundtrack. It almost seems like the soundtrack is kind of dictating the pace of the film in a lot of ways.
Alluding to earlier, this segment is called how to write a John Carpenter theme in 30 seconds or less. So I'm hoping that I can teach you how to do that.
Yes, please.
So so I happen to have with me here, you can't see it because this is audio only, I have a big ol' analog polysynth.
Of course you do.
I can see where this is going.
And this is not a Prophet 5, unfortunately. I those are more expensive than I have money for. But this is a little bit after. This is a 1983 Roland JX3P. But it should do the business.
Oh my goodness.
I have a sort of sound that may sound a bit like a John Carpenter movie. You hear that?
It's eating at my brain.
So you're gonna want some like really simple low bass line. So like and then you're gonna want to add the high part. So you're gonna want to do something real creepy sounding, like. And hopefully, once you start doing that, you get some kind of creepy sounding lines that start to sort of sound like a John Carpenter soundtrack.
Hey, they really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's... you can see why he kind of went through this process of making his soundtracks, because it's really a pretty quick way to turn around a pretty creepy sounding piece.
A lot of formulaic aspects to how he goes about doing it. And I think that is partially what adds to that
oh, definitely.
That atmosphere is that they all have kind of similar anatomies.
There's a lot of credit for finding that formula that works, especially with the technology developing at that time.
Oh,
that
yeah.
he looked to that and was like, yes, this is the sound I want. Especially, like, I find it, like, contrasts in a really interesting way with, like, the whole setting of the fog in particular. Because it's like you've got this, like, sleepy fishing village, like, this, like, really, like, classic nautical ghost story. And you've got this, like, synth. And it's, like, really... It's very bizarre. It makes it kind of surreal almost.
At first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It definitely gives it a very surreal element.
Yeah, kind of dreamlike
very
quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Ethereal and, like, creepy sounding, for sure.
Creepy in, like, a different way than, like, the rest of the setting is creepy. And I think that's what...
sort of like an otherworldly kind of...
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about this movie, is the fact that so much of its creep factor is derived from the soundtrack. Like, you have, like, these beautiful scenes where, like, people are, like, driving through, like, this picturesque place, but it's the soundtrack that's letting you know this is still creepy, there's still, like, stakes here. Like, yeah, exactly. It definitely reminds you, like, you're still in this film, there's still spooky stuff happening, even with, like, the really beautiful setting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, definitely, like, there's that one scene and it just seems like a nice day out in Southern California.
Yeah.
And but there's this real weird creepy vibe to it because of this music.
Yeah, and it's kind of got the sense of foreboding to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, like, at this time, like, if you were watching this film in theaters for the first time, this soundtrack would be even more, like, out of nowhere.
Yeah, it would be, like, booming, and, like, when that kind of organ-like sound kind of flushes out at the beginning, it's like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like having this sound be really dated and like attributing it specifically to John Carpenter. But what if you're hearing this for the first time without that context? It would be even like weirder for doing that.
Managed to do this style even before the technology was really there. Evident on like even movies like Dark Star and stuff like that, and in Assault on Precinct 13, where like, you know, you couldn't just go out and buy a synthesizer and then sequence them. Like MIDI didn't exist. Like you couldn't like edit the notes on a computer.
Right. So it's pretty breaking ground stuff, really.
Yeah,
it's groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, and I've tried to mess around with sort of syncing up these machines to each other, and it's not an easy thing to do, like, at all.
The amount of time you probably spent, like, getting it perfect.
It must have been a tedious operation to get them all
exactly.
synced up.
Yeah, and especially doing it on tape, where tape has, like, a sort of tendency to drift a little bit in speed and stuff like that, and having to get that synced up to the film and everything, it must have been a huge hassle. Yeah.
Everywhere. And like that's what you're working with. You're not working with files. You're working with these big rolls of very delicate material.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Medium to the whole process.
Yeah.
Just the amount of trouble we had setting up like just this today.
Exactly.
Versus
setting up this podcast, recording just this podcast is tough enough, but actually managing to do that. And I mean, it wasn't even necessarily obvious that he would have been able to watch the film while he was composing this. Like something as simple as just like being able to watch the film as you're writing the music. It's because you would have needed a projector, you would have needed a print of the film, which it probably wasn't even finished editing yet.
Yeah.
How long was it between like when that window shutter slammed and I'm gonna time it perfectly with this? Like that's fucking hard. Like I can't.
Exactly. And the fact that he basically did it all on his own.
With like something just like standard and like orchestral, like the entire personality of the thing would be different. Like it would not be recognizable
instantly.
Yeah,
definitely.
Especially again, like those last few scenes, like that last fight scene is just so integral.
Yeah, that whole last scene business is really kind of weird.
The movie and its pacing that is weird.
That they had to do those rewrites and change the whole thing a bit. It just kind of doesn't come together in the end.
It's like 2/3 of the way there, but then like there just wasn't the amount of like they were obviously so rushed with so many things, like we obviously discussed, like the makeup and some of like the effects that they did, but it's really apparent in the overall like storytelling that there's a lot of stuff that wasn't there, and like there's even a couple scenes where like what the characters are saying happened versus what you witnessed happen is different. Like the assistant woman, I'm forgetting her name, like Sandy or something in the movie, who was the Nancy Loomis character. Yeah, like she was saying like, oh yeah, like my car alarm went off and like it woke the whole street up. It's like, no, that is not what happened in that scene. All the car alarms went off and then your chair flew across the room. And he's like, that she's not mentioning that, and like her verbal portrayal of that scene is so different from what we witnessed. It just makes it so clear that that hadn't actually happened in the production yet. Like it's just like you can see that there's a disconnect between like just like the scenes, like the very fabric of the movie isn't quite coherent with itself.
They tack that extra ending on.
Especially that he draws attention to it too. He's just like, why not me? Why not 6? And then they come and it's like, what was the point of that line even?
Just a sloppy ending.
Yeah.
I feel it just looked like they brought it together and then we're like, wait, that's not
like, oh, I guess
enough.
we gotta end it, right? You know, that's
of the movie got me really hyped and I thought it was really strong, but unfortunately it was one of those movies that kind of peters out towards the end. Like
basically by the time the fog enters, it kind of lost its drive.
Which is pretty early in the movie.
That's also where you gave up that like this was gonna have a plot that really did something with its characters.
Yeah.
Like, it really sucks. Like, I was really psyched for, like, the Jamie Lee Curtis character. Like, I was like, oh, she's kind of mysterious. She rolls into town. She's, like, an artist. She has a backstory. Like, but none of that is important at all. Like, none of the characters' personalities are important. They don't use them.
Generally, you don't get to sit with any of the characters for long enough.
And they don't...
Like...
establish characters. They don't establish characters at all. It's just these kind of husks that deliver lines. And I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis does it the best. Like her.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you get a little bit of a character from Stevie.
Yeah, but her character and her backstory is entirely established through panning through like some photographs. Like that's her entire backstory. And it feels really rushed, and especially it's like you get that, and then you get the one scene with her kid, and then that's it. That's her character.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get it is not from her or her dialogue. It's just from
a little bit of how she's interacting with the weatherman. Like a little bit there. It's like, oh, she's hard to get. She's mysterious. Like that's not a character.
The weatherman character was just stupid.
His death was the most glorious thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hold on, sweetie or sweetheart. Oh.
He was so repugnant.
He was so gross.
Also, just what a fucking dumbass when the fog started to roll. He's like, oh yeah, what are they joking around with us now? It was like...
to one of the film's shortcomings, which is like, it looks like someone's shining a light. It's like, yeah, it does. Because that's what it is.
Well, you're
not supposed to point that out.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, because it is, and that actually draws attention to the fact that it looks really bad.
Maybe the actor was a little bit fed up with the whole production. It was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll just draw attention to it.
Yeah, they just had him ad-lib that part, and that was his response. No, there was a lot of stuff in that movie. There was just like a lot of missed potential, like as I said before. It was like the resolution had nothing to do with like any of the characters. Like the resolution had nothing to do with any of their personalities, any strengths that were like
no arcs.
Yeah, there's just nothing. I'm like, why did we learn about like Elizabeth Sully? Like what if like her like being an artist played into it in some way? Like she recognized something as like a symbol, or like there were so many opportunities.
I'd like to look at what was originally in the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Character a little bit, because they like the poster is of Jamie Lee Curtis like being menaced by the fog, and it's like
her in that scene.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why they put Jamie Lee Curtis on the poster is obviously because
full name in person.
Well, I mean, she was in Halloween, and the people who liked Halloween were definitely already interested in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of right off the bat, it kind of illustrates how hollow the characters are to the story.
Yeah.
Just like that they felt okay with. Yeah, I mean, I guess she's not really the main character, but you can make the theatrical poster just.
Yeah. Like they kind of tried to make it an ensemble cast, but then didn't really.
Yeah, and none of them interact really.
Until the last bit.
Yeah, like...
And as Mimi said, the range in acting ability...
have like such a huge difference. You've got like actual like good lines being delivered by one character and then terribly delivered by another one. It's just like it takes you out of it. It makes me laugh at some of it, but it does take you out of like any kind of suspension of disbelief you had going. But, I don't know, there was a lot of, like, weird ways that they established characters, too. Like, I found the whole thing with Nick really weird, because it was, like, the first scene we get with him, he's, like, driving, and then we find out, like, a whole, like, quarter of the movie later that he's actually a fisherman on a ship. And you're like, where did this come from? Why isn't the first time we saw him doing something related to that? Rather than...
They couldn't have had the hitchhiking.
So. Yeah.
Or I guess they could have just added that in later.
Yeah, or, like, just shown, like, him leaving the docks. Yeah. You know? Like, hanging up his rope for the day, leaving the docks, getting in his truck, you know? Like, something like that.
I just want to point out, like, the first time we see him, he's actually drinking a Budweiser while driving his truck.
Yeah.
picture we get from him is literally that.
Yeah, it's true. That's his character.
That's
right
his.
there.
Like, that's him. That's them establishing character. Is that one scene?
Yeah.
But
The radio.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was such an awkward line and such an awkward response to it. Like, I'll try and keep you turned on. Okay. I was like, ugh. Please stop.
We're wandering into that territory now. So I think before we get to our final thoughts on this film, I think it might be time for a little segment that asked for it. Nobody wants it, but guess what, everybody? You're getting it anyway.
All right.
I'm laughing way too hard at this.
This is, in fact, the segment that nobody asked for nor wanted. This is 6 Degrees of Star Trek.
But you're getting it anyway.
Yeah, you're getting it anyway. So this is the segment in which we attempt to connect people who were involved in this movie with the TV series or media universe that is Star Trek. Star Trek Online, I don't want to hear about it. So connections, and we generally try to do 3 connections per movie, and we're gonna start with Adrienne Barbeau. In the 1999 episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, she plays the Romulan Senator Kretak. In the episode Inter Arma Enim Silent Legends.
Oh.
Which is a great episode. It's a great episode. Gets embroiled in a Section 31 plot to do some kind of espionage on the Romulans. And
he's the
Adrienne
Romulan.
Barbeau, she is a Romulan senator, Senator Kretak. Yes, and so that's a direct connection, 1 degree. And so the next, we have a 2 degree. We're going to go through Dean Cundey today. So Dean Cundey was in a couple movies. Well, he wasn't in them. He was the director of photography for some movies you might have heard of called Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3.
Indeed, yeah.
Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 has a certain actor known as Christopher Lloyd, who plays...
No! Okay, Christopher Lloyd is his own degrees of separation away from everything.
Lloyd was also he played Doc Brown in in Back to the Future.
He played the hell out of Doc Brown.
A somewhat important character. Sorry?
He played the hell out of Doc Brown.
He played the hell out of Doc Brown, yeah.
He did after.
Yeah, including
After.
a movie called... Actually, yeah, he played in Star Trek 3.
Oh.
Which it was actually before Back to the Future.
Really? Oh, he was just warming up then.
Yeah, he was warming up to being Doc Brown. I don't know if he'd already read the script and he was just like, this is me. Like, I am
He
Doc
was just
Brown.
playing himself.
Yeah, so Christopher Lloyd played Commander Krug, who was a Klingon commander in Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. Yeah, I'm not gonna put in any spoilers for that movie if you haven't seen it. Sorry, no, our third person. So this is a weird one, as I always try to do with boats. Today we're going through the film Halloween. This has nothing to do with boats, by the way.
Oh, I thought you were gonna be like one of the ships the ship that was the Seagrass was actually also in.
Although
Journey
this
Home.
movie has a lot of boats in it, the Navy was not involved, so we don't get any enterprises or anything like that.
Shame.
But So in the movie Halloween, the classic character Michael Myers is wearing a mask.
He's wearing a mask.
Is supposedly, well, I mean, not supposedly, this is confirmed, that was sold as a Captain Kirk mask.
What?
Yes, that is supposed to be a mask of William Shatner's face.
It's very disturbing.
What?
It's rather disturbing.
It's kind of
not
the
heard
worst
this fact.
thing about that.
They painted it white, so it's not like they didn't just take the mask off the shelf and put
Yeah,
it.
but it is actually
That
supposed
is-
to be William Shatner's face.
It's supposed to be William
That's
Shatner's face.
truly horrifying.
You should see it in the reboot. In the reboot, it's like even worse somehow because it's like filthy.
I mean, it looks like maybe
Yeah.
William Shatner's corpse that has been floating in like a puddle for
Exactly.
So we go through any number of people that are involved in this movie: Jamie Lee Curtis, or Debra Hill, or John Carpenter, or Dean Cundy, and we go to Halloween. From Halloween, we go through the disgusting mask on the face of Michael Myers into Star Trek. Take your pick. Because of Shatner.
That's a good degree. I enjoyed that degree thoroughly.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I didn't even think about that. That's really good.
To the legal portion of our of the podcast. This is by making it a work of critique so that we can
Yes.
play the audio. So would you Mimi, you start us off giving us maybe some of your final thoughts on this film?
To summarize a lot of my feelings is like this movie has a lot of really good highs and really, really low lows. And just like as a whole movie, I enjoy it on a lot of different levels, but I don't think I could really classify it as a good movie in a lot of ways. Like if I were to just critique it like as a film as I would any other film, I would have to say it's probably not a successful movie, but I did enjoy it a lot overall.
A scale of 1 to 10. How would you?
I don't even know if it's something that can be rated, honestly. Like, giving
Yeah.
it stars to
Is
me...
it a simultaneously like a 2 and a
Exactly,
7?
depending on what element
Yeah.
of the film you're critiquing. And, like, that's what is kind of tragic about this to me, is because there's so much potential and so much talent that went into this thing, and then so much, like, time constraints, and unfortunately, like, a degree of incompetency from certain actors, I think, as well, really did hurt
I really
this.
Well, I
hate
mean-
that lady.
One thing that we can take solace in is that the people who did work on this movie went on to make
Yeah, a lot of the good
Yeah.
elements of this movie, like, really, like, went on to do, like, good things and had successful careers, and that is really good. I think that there's, on paper, it almost feels like this story is being told to you by Carpenter. Like, it's like you can almost hear his voice being like, oh, and this happens, and, like, this is the atmosphere, and this is creepy. It seems like the movie's
you
being
kinda
told
can.
to you rather than actually acted, and you're observing it and have, like, a suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, it kind of has like a pitch vibe to it in
Yeah.
a way.
Sorry, say that again.
It kind of has like a pitch vibe, like someone's pitching it to you.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
They
The
included
entire
all the
movie
elements-
sounds and almost feels like someone's trying to sell me the idea of this movie, rather than I'm actually watching the movie and feel like completely immersed in the experience.
So are you sold though?
I'm sold in some ways, and a lot of that way has to do with like a certain degree of nostalgia and like a certain degree of being able to like poke fun at a movie but still enjoy it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, this movie is very strange to me because oftentimes I look at like a really bad movie and it's like so bad that it's good, and it's just like this wonderful circus of incompetence. But this one's a lot deeper
Yeah.
than that because there's like so much palpable talent in it. But then parts where you see like a ghost struggling to open a door. And you're just like, and like the ambiance is beautiful. And it's creepy, the soundtrack is creepy, and like there was a really good scene just before that. But they still use that take. of the ghost struggling to open a door. And it's just like, it's just so bizarre. Yeah. It's just such a bizarre viewing experience because of that. And you've got really good performances by Jamie Lee Curtis. But then you also have half of the movie where she says nothing and clutches to, like, Nick's arm.
Yeah,
and then
that's basically all they give her.
Yeah, and it's just like, from a writing standpoint, it's like, how could you do that to her?
Story is a little not very believable. Because, like,
about her, and then they just don't deliver on.
Yeah.
And I think she, in particular, is the worst example of this in the movie. She has the most told to you about her naturally that isn't just, like, directly told to you through, like, basically visual exposition. Like, she's the only one who, like, naturally progresses her own character rather than just, like, having it stated to you in some way. And so she's the one I feel like that was done the most dirty by the writing in this, which is...
motivation for her character, at least, that I can see as to why she's sticking around this town the whole movie.
True, and she even is like, I'm going to Vancouver now, and then just doesn't.
Yeah, maybe it's time I go back to Vancouver now. Or not back, because she's...
Continue on to Vancouver. And that there's no resolution with her at the end, too. I was just like, there was no resolution with any of those characters. The only resolution any of them was given was that they survived.
The priest.
Yeah, or didn't.
The father gets a bit of...
Yeah, he gets attacked with a sword. You know, like, I guess that counts as, like, a satisfying conclusion, because it's the best we're gonna get. Like, I was already playing how it was gonna go between, like, Elizabeth and Nick at the end. It's like, either she's gonna stay or he's gonna go with her to Vancouver, and I was, like, literally playing that in my head. It's like, it's not so bad around here, or something, or, like, maybe Vancouver's more exciting, like...
No, but, like, in reality, she just goes to Vancouver and he sticks around. Yeah. Like, that's what would happen.
Yeah, but it's just, like, it's so weird to see something telegraphed to you so clearly, and in such, like, a predictable way, and then not get any kind of follow through on them. It's like, okay, I guess they're alive, but, like, what purpose do any of them have?
Did they gain from this experience? What did they learn? What are they, like, how are they changed? It's like, they didn't have characters to get changed, so it's like... I mean, anyway...
benefited from the experience, and there was no difference between them and, like, the characters that were just, like, randomly killed off. Except for Dan. I wanted Dan to die immediately. And, like, well...
Dan's the weatherman, right?
Dan's the weatherman.
Wait, is he Dan O'Bannon?
Yeah. Yeah, he's the one named after the guy.
The reference,
But yeah, as soon as he came on screen, I was like, yes, excellent, I hope he dies. But...
I don't hope Dan O'Bannon.
Yeah, no, not him, but, like, the character. But, yeah, I don't know, there was a lot of weird things about the writing in this that didn't make sense, and I was saying to Keaton earlier, like, the writing was weird, but then also some of the line delivery was really weird,
especially from some of our less...
Yeah, exactly, like, all, like, you know what, the kid gets a pass, because, like, he's a kid, you know, he's a kid in a low-budget movie. You know what, he's annoying, but, like, I don't really hold him to any kind of critical standard. Piece of wood, so... You know what, if anything, he's a bonus because of that. He's a bonus to me because of that. But then you had, like... I remember this one particular scene with the woman billed, like, Sandy, the assistant to the chairman lady, who I don't know why she was in the movie. Like, she has, like... a scene where she's delivering a line and, like, forgets to breathe? Like, I know that sounds weird, but she speaks...
I do that while I'm making
She speaks in a run-on sentence, if that makes any sense. Like, the way she delivers the lines, it's like she ignores the punctuation in the line that she was given, and, like, she just, like, runs out of breath, almost, as she's talking, and it's so bizarre to watch.
That is kind of the mark of an inexperienced actor is the speeding through of the lines.
Yeah, and it was, like, very, very, like, amateur to me, which really surprised me, especially considering the veteran actress she was stood next to for most of this movie. And I'm like, it was so bizarre.
I don't really know how to pronounce it, to be honest. It lowered her stock a little bit in the film, because she's good. She's a good actress. She's done good work. But like A, as we've said, there's no character, and B, she's stuck next to like the most stiff actor in the whole thing.
Like, and to be fair, like, if you put me in front of a camera, I'd be much worse than the Sandy woman. I would just start crying immediately just from the fact the camera was pointed at me. But like, it's just weird. It's just it really makes it hard to exist in the same universe as this movie with performances like that.
Agreed.
If there was a little bit more consistency, like if all the actors were like kind of like that, then it would either be a horrible film or be a so bad that it's good kind of film. But as you say, because it doesn't quite, it has such a bizarre range, it never quite crosses over.
A lot of ways think that this is the perfect movie to analyze like this, because it gives you time to appreciate the parts of this movie that were really masterfully done and had real talent behind them, but also still get the enjoyment of kind of laughing at incompetency and low budget stuff.
Yeah.
If we did Halloween, we would just constantly be going on about how great the movie it is.
Yeah, but something like this, you can honestly look at it and like say its shortcomings, but also still give it credit for what it did right. And I appreciate this movie for being what it was, because it's almost like a good character study of everyone involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better than that. I don't really have much to add.
It's almost a really good movie, but it's just. It suffers by mainly like the pacing and like the fact that we just don't get to sit with any character for long enough. Like, I think, as I said earlier in the podcast, all you got to do is cut out like 2 or 3 characters, and this movie gets a hell of a lot better.
Extras. Oh my god, add extras. Like, add extras in the scenes where they needed to be, like, showing people that are reacting to the horror of the fall, because it's like, did everyone die? Are they safe in their homes? Where are
I think for me, what I kept coming back to, that kind of caused so many of the problems we're talking about, is I just don't think they quite had it with the script. I think,
given that they had to come back and redo parts of it,
I think it's
like that's
it's a perfect example. They had an interesting idea that they failed to pull off in the initial run, and then because of time constraints and because they needed a project out and they were running out of time, they were forced, unfortunately, to, instead of what they should have done is maybe just started from scratch and bailed and tried to do something different. But obviously you can't do that in that situation.
At the end of the day, like, this is still an enjoyable movie, at least for me to watch.
Right, yeah.
And, like, it did make them money. Like,
yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was a success. It was a fine, profitable follow-up to Halloween.
Yeah, and you know, they obviously spent the time that they would have spent, that they could have spent more time making this movie better. But then again, like, they all had other movies to make that were really good.
The movie is like a weird kind of like purgatory. Sort of, like.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
It's like, it's a stepping stone between other things. I think it's kind of it's a.
So, but one of the reasons why I find it so interesting to talk about is because it's kind of you have a whole bunch of people going on to do different things, and so they all kind of pass through this movie. Yeah.
Even like necessarily, it wasn't really a passion project for anybody involved.
No,
it was just kind of like,
I definitely think like
it was let's follow up Halloween project.
As I said like earlier, this wasn't anyone's magnum opus. Like this wasn't the biggest project any of them would ever do.
Mm-hmm.
No,
unless you're the guy who wrote a bunch of curse words in like the journal that they were reading.
What about the actress who played Sandy or whatever?
She was surprisingly in a bunch of other things afterwards.
Really?
Yeah, they continued to work with her, which was like really bizarre to me. Like, that was one of the biggest surprises that I think I saw, was that how many other projects she did, which really surprised me, because I'm like, maybe she can act in other things, but I'm sorry, I just don't think that...
Maybe she improved.
Yeah, I just didn't see anything from her except making every scene she was in that much more awkward and stilted.
I think overall, we've come to the conclusion that it's in a lot of ways, a well-made film. that has some glaring flaws that become more apparent as you watch it and as the story progresses.
Definitely could be better.
Could be better. It's excellent showcase of those involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that pretty much brings us
That wraps her up.
to the end. Yeah.
It's worth watching, especially like because it gives you a lot of insight into these people and their careers and like their style.
Yeah, I think it's more for me. It was an academic kind of viewing.
I enjoyed it definitely.
Thanks a lot, Mimi, for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Welcome back again.
Yeah.